Hello, and welcome to another exciting adventure with Conspire a Theory. I have with me a very special guest. I've been clamoring to get her on the show for so long. I love her so much. You hear me talk about her so often on the show whenever I make references. She's one of my favorite interviews that I've done with. She's probably the only person that I've ever done an interview with that we actually ran out of stuff to talk about because she's so thorough and good at that. So welcome to the stage. Katie Ward, how are you doing?
It's good to be here. I'm doing well, thank you. And it's Cat Ward, not Katie.
Cat Ward. My mistake.
You're not the first to do that.
Yeah, I always get something wrong. It's either I call you Katie Ward or I call you Katie Hart. That's another one. I refer to you so much as Katie Hart.
Yep, I've heard that. Yep.
That's funny because it's probably because your show is named Paranormal Heart. So I
probably
squish the two together. That's not how that's supposed to do. But
maybe that could be a stage name now, Katie Hart.
It's already taken. It's because there actually is a Katie Hart in the paranormal field. But the thing is, she's sort of like, I think she's retired. So I don't know. But if you get a knock on your door and you use that, I got nothing to do with that. Okay. Leave me out of that. But either way, it's the, and you know, it is a bit of a compliment because Katie Hart, when she was in the range was, you know, a very, you know, a lovable, very well thought podcaster, and for you to be confused for someone that's, you know, revered, I would take that as a compliment, even though
thank you so much.
It's not the case. But Cat Ward, which is you know, your real name, that's just who you are. That's just what it is.
Yes.
and
Go ahead. I also have another friend in the paranormal community called Kat Hobson. She does shows as well, and whenever I'm in a chat room in particular for Spaced Out Radio, Dave always calls me, like he always welcomes everyone in the chat, and he sees Paranormal Heart and he just says Kat Hobson, and I always put, no, it's Ward. It's like, oh, I knew that.
I thought he'd have you divide up like Cat 1, Cat 2.
We've done that. I've been on Kat's show before, and she's been on mine, and we kind of had to go with Cat 1 and Cat 2. It's kind of funny.
So where we're getting on the topic, why don't you go ahead and introduce us to your show and tell us a little bit about it, how you got started, where it is, where you're coming from, and all that stuff, all that good stuff.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say it's a great honor being on your show. Thank you so very much. So my name is Cat Ward. I have a little podcast called Paranormal Heart Podcast. I first started out as a paranormal investigator here in the Ottawa Valley in Ontario, Canada, and just started doing a podcast. It's actually going to be 7 years now at the end of November. About a month and a half ago, I joined a network called UPRN. It's United Public Radio Network out of New Orleans. It's 107.7 FM. And I started out doing my podcast the last Sunday of every month. Then I went to the second and last Sunday, and now I'm doing every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So it's growing. I just absolutely love doing this. I love speaking to people about the paranormal. I used to think paranormal was only ghosts. I quickly realized, no, that's not the case. That's just one aspect of the paranormal, because there's extraterrestrials, UFOs, cryptids. The list just goes on and on and on. And the show can also be found on YouTube and Podbean and Spotify and pretty much wherever you find the show.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, the paranormal field is very crowded. It's, you know, I'll joke, it's so crowded that even the Bigfoot and Dogman have to hitch a ride on the UFO sometimes.
Right? Yeah. And it's funny because some people in the paranormal community, they don't like to overlap. You know, if some people are strictly ghosts, some people are strictly Bigfoot, some people are strictly extraterrestrials, and it's really not. It's just a mixture of everything.
Yeah. The we don't want our peas and carrots touching. Yeah.
Exactly right.
I find myself in that predicament as well, as I like to specialize in ETs. That's what I consider my specialty. And with the other stuff, although I try not to dismiss it, but when there is overlap, then I'm interested in the proliferary stuff, and that's when people decide to yada yada it. They decide to let me give you an example. Like someone would have a paranormal experience, like in the form of an ET. They would get abducted. They'd have the abduction experience, and then they would describe poltergeist activity in their home. And I'm like, well, this is the perfect time to elaborate on that poltergeist activity. Instead, they yada yada it because the main story, the main draw is the ETs, and and it's like, the one time that you got to like expand upon it, it's just a format thing. I don't know what to make of it.
And there may very well be a correlation between poltergeist and ETs. We really don't know. I mean, there's just so much strangeness out there, and I'm starting to find, like for Bigfoot, for example, the more that people talk about their encounters with Bigfoot, they're almost, because some people are starting to talk about orbs with their encounters and
Mhm.
strange lights and UFO sightings all at the same time. So, is there a correlation to ETs and Bigfoot?
Yeah, I hear that as well, and some of the governing bodies that do the research, and they've been open and upfront in the past of, well, we don't, if it has this element, we're going to dismiss the story altogether. I think recently some of the larger, or some of the outlets have decided to change their tune on that, and I think it's probably because of the pressure of this I guess growing sense of the woo becoming more palatable. I think that's because of this multi-dimensional theory, and that people find extremely relatable now due to the proliferation of the Marvel movies, which I sort of blame on that, in particularly the Doctor Strange.
Mhm.
Multiverse is now on everyone's tongue, and although I'm a bit stringent on that because I don't think people are using it quite in that means. I don't quite think it means what you think it means, but you know, I don't know. I have a hard time dealing with it, mostly because it's coming from comic book movies, and I think people are trying to, in my belief, cover a mystery with another mystery, and I don't think that's solving anything. But
Agreed.
I
Yeah.
I don't know. That's another conversation.
Well, I've spoken with some people who strictly do Bigfoot research, and very, very well known in that community. And they're adamant to say that they're just another flesh and blood creature, and that there's no correlation with UFOs. And other people think no, there is a correlation. So, are we talking about two different things? Like, are Bigfoot actually a flesh and blood creature from this planet? And whenever other people see orbs and have UFO encounters all at the same time, is that something completely different? Or or is there, like I said before, a correlation? But more research definitely is needed, I believe.
Absolutely, absolutely. As far as what in this field, you've had your show for quite some time, probably about just as long as I have. So we've sort of been on the beat, so to speak, for the same amount. What is your experience with the paranormal, if you have any, and what brings you to the table as far as it how it relates to you personally?
Well, like most people in the paranormal field, I did have an experience when I was a child. I've only met a handful of people who claim they've never had any paranormal experiences, and they're very, very fascinated in it. But so I grew up on the east coast of Canada in a small province called New Brunswick, and my parents and I lived on the top floor of a three-story apartment building. Now each floor just had one apartment, so there's just three apartments. A very, very old building. Before we moved in, it used to be heated by a coal furnace in the basement. I don't know exactly when it was built, but I know it was very, very old. And I had an experience with the Hat Man in that apartment. I used to scream, and just my dad still today talks about the night terrors that I had in that apartment building. And but the Hat Man that I encountered, he was only about 4 feet tall. I never really spoke about it for many, many years because I was always, as a child, some of the kids used to tell me that that's the weird, creepy girl who likes ghosts and things like that. Well, I still am, but I've embraced it. So call me creepy. I don't care. Um, but I just didn't speak about it for the longest time. And then I was listening to a podcast as an adult, and they were talking about the Hat Man, but his encounter was a tall one. And then I started realizing, oh my, other people are having the same encounters, but mine was short and these ones are tall. So it was the first time that I had heard about the Hat Man from this podcast. And of course, I've been hearing a lot more ever since, but it's just fascinating because what I've said so many times on my show, what really draws my attention to the paranormal is it doesn't matter what part of the world you're from, if you're rich or poor, what color you are, what religion, people seem to be having these really weird experiences, and they might not be called the same thing, but the descriptions are very, very similar. And so that the paranormal in a way brings humanity together because something's going on out there. So that was probably my first that's what piqued my interest with the paranormal was the Hat Man. And then growing up, I've had some I'm sensitive. I don't consider myself full-blown psychic because it's not something that I can control like so many other people that I know. Um, we would go to different locations, my parents and I would sense ghosts. So it was always something that was in my life, and my parents never made me feel like I was strange or talking about nonsense. They would always ask me questions. Okay, well, where are you seeing this? What's going on? They just they didn't really dismiss me, which was a good thing. And then my mom believed in it. My dad didn't. He does now, a little bit. But that's pretty much where I started my interest of the paranormal, was just from a very young age.
Yeah, that's something that now in this conversation with you, I'm not as skilled an interviewer as you are, so you're not going to be leaving the show empty like when I left your show. It's you're going to probably have to come back to discuss all these wonderful things that have happened in your life. But as far as being the spooky kid in, like, I imagine the time that you were growing up probably would have been the 80s and 90s adjacent around that time.
Yeah, I'm in my I'm 57 years old now. So yeah, the born in the late 60s, 70s, 80s is pretty much when I grew up. Yeah, and the paranormal really wasn't a big topic back then. And if it was, you were looked at like you had three heads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was always that the spooky kid type of thing.
Yeah.
That's what it was called in the 80s or 90s when during my youth was you were
Yep.
the spooky kid. And since then, now I think that's become a bit more mainstream and more accepted now. It's become sort of
It
like,
sure has.
which is a good thing. But on the end of it, I often wonder, if being so open about it, is that really like a good thing or a bad thing? Like what, from what you see on how the paranormal is handled now versus how it was handled as a kid, I imagine, given your experience, you probably see it as an improvement because it's more open and accepted. I
Yeah.
want,
Go ahead.
yeah, I wonder sometimes if this, if people are more aware of it and looking at it with the observer effect, if that's probably making the paranormal more prominent, that it's giving it, like, I guess if those that like to use the whole loosh type of alien lizards like to suck on our bad feels, if that's maybe making more happen because we're looking for it more, as opposed to, because I'm sure a Bigfoot that walks through a forest where no one sees him, does he even exist, type of thing. I don't know. I'm probably looking
Yep.
into it more than I think I should. What your impression?
I think because it's a little bit more mainstream now because of the TV shows. I used to make fun of the TV shows going investigations not 100% like that, But I have to give kudos to them because it's allowed people to be able to talk more about their experiences and know that they're not alone, that other people globally are having these experiences. But I also think there's a downside to more people accepting this field is, for example, my boss one time, I got to work and he says, Kat, you have to look at the security footage that we got. We caught a ghost. And I'm like, okay, let me see. And I'm like, no, that was a bug. He goes, no, look at it. I'm like, no, I can see the little antenna. Like it was a bug close to the security camera. You didn't catch anything. I'm really sorry. So I believe that we want to believe so much about all these paranormal things that a lot of people just aren't questioning. Like, you do have to question what you're seeing too. Don't just believe right away that you caught something paranormal. So, but again, like I said, it's getting more people to talk about it and a little bit more openly. So a lot of people don't have as much stress about it anymore.
Yeah, I can understand that. In the paranormal field so far, what would you say is your favorite story so far, of not your personal account or your friends, but like a mainstream account of whatever that's prominent, that really like kept you in, that you felt was very interesting and noteworthy?
So not necessarily a guest that I've had, just something that I've come
Yeah,
across.
just something in the mix, like pre-existing before you showed up.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even know how to answer that because there's so much out there that's jeepers. I think right now it's probably UFOs and extraterrestrials because I was kind of into that before, but not like I am now. I'm starting to talk about it more on my show, and there's supposed to be disclosure now from various governments. I don't know if I should believe that or not, or if it's just a diversion, or if they're preparing us. Like I really have no idea. But there just seems to be a lot more people talking about UFOs and ETs now.
Yeah, I you didn't peek at my notes, did you?
No,
Okay,
I didn't. Why?
is that your psychic prominence coming through? Because that's like the next question that I have
Oh
for
no,
you.
it. That's funny.
Okay, so deduct 2 points for Kat for skipping ahead. Um,
I'm sorry.
we'll discuss the disclosure stuff later, but
Mhm.
for right now, getting back as far as these prominent stories, like specifically, is there something that well, you were, before you became Cat Ward, host and psychic intuitive superstar, was there like something that you saw out there, like the Betty and Barney Hill, or the what is it, the Enfield poltergeist case, or something that you saw in the mix that really sparked your interest in this sort of stuff? So I guess I'll resubmit the question to you
Sure.
now that I've laid additional parameters that are spoiler free.
Gee. Well, first of all, I'm far from being a superstar, but thank you for that. Um, Not really. Just everything ever since I was young, like, when I first heard about Ed and Lorraine Warren when I was a kid, nobody knew who they were, and then I read a biography about them, and I thought, "Wow, I kinda wanna do this," not to that level 'cause, that's beyond my pay grade. I don't want to do, um, negative entity demon cases, that's just not my thing, but no, this not really, it's just the fact that people are talking more about their experiences, which really piques my interest.
Yeah, it's okay to say I don't know. That's something that I
Oh,
think
yeah.
this field is slowly coming, more comfortable with, is to say I don't know, and
Yep,
just allow the mystery to propagate in a way.
yep.
Oftentimes, I find is that the so many, what I guess this is sort of a community and more cultural thing in this nature, is that we have this expectation that because we're on the forefront of it, that we are the experts. Some people have allowed this to get into their heads, and this has led to
Mm-hmm.
a lot of toxic behavior within our communities, and divisiveness and team sports. They've tried to turn this into team sports type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like a lot of individuals running in the mix who might have undiagnosed mental illnesses that
Mm-hmm.
often lead to enablism rather than they should be, confronted and dealt with treatment. I think there are even a few cases of some prominent ghost hosts who have come down with addiction to substance addictions,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about within this field.
I think
the
so.
the thing is that oftentimes, with all that divisiveness and stuff like this nature, I mean, there is still this sort of unified front, and as far as what you were stating with the Ed and Lorraine Warren, the right now it's sort of we are constantly juggling swords in this field,
Mm-hmm.
and they're double-edged swords the entire time, like you had discussed earlier about the ghost shows. These guys, yeah, that's not how it's done. It's sort of glamorified in this sort of Hollywood-esque type of sphere,
Mm-hmm.
but it sells tickets, it brings people in. And then we have the double-edged sword of the Ed and Lorraine Warrens, where they right now there's an entire cinematic Marvel-esque type universe
Mm-hmm.
based around them that has, that brings tons of people in. But when looking back, peeking behind the curtain, we see that these characters probably weren't as savory as their screen counterparts. That Ed was probably abusive, and he probably kept underage girl as a pet. I That's just the it's a very salacious topic that I'm reluctant to get into, but I won't dismiss that it's there. And we have these issues where, like a lot of, it's like, yeah, we have the bright and shiny that attracts people, but then the closer you get to it, you see it's very grimy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like layered in filth type of and it's. I just wish we had better examples, but that's simply the way that it is, unfortunately. And I guess that's why so many of us try to, try to lead by example, so to speak, so that maybe our show can catch a few people in or something of that nature, and so that way people don't can come in and they don't have stuff dragging in from the bottom of their shoe that of salacious stories and stuff of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that those are my
Yeah.
hopes moving forward.
I think it's like that with any celebrity, no matter if they're like you mentioned earlier, Marvel actors, or if it's paranormal celebrities. If you really look at anybody with a microscope, you're going to find something that's not as what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Not as clean, I guess. But we are shown a certain aspect, a certain side of these people that not everyone is privy to.
Yeah. And I guess that's where people would blame social media as a construct, because now before there was just the news, and there
Yep.
was television shows, and it was structured, and there was a very strict barrier of entry. If you got on television, you had to jump through so many hoops and be vetted and be curated. And
Mm-hmm.
now we have the 24-hour news cycle, which was just for the first few hours just wish wash repeat of whatever the latest news cycle is. Because I know I was there. I was one of those kids that as soon as my parents got cable TV, I got like one of the cable boxes put into my room, and I was watching MSNBC and all these news stories. I was addicted to the news cycle, and then now we have YouTube, where everything everything and everyone is now no longer off limits. Yes, they have their, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, but even then, people are still getting around to it. It's like that the infrastructure is still there, that they can talk about anything and everything. And now it's surprising what is stories now. There's this guy who's the saga of, was it Johnny Somali, who's this nuisance streamer in South Korea, who's going to be probably going to prison for like several decades for his YouTube antics, for his streamer antics, because he just, that's his thing. He's made an economy around himself, going places and being annoying. And then he's gone overseas, and now that he's doing it overseas, they're not putting up with it like we do here in America. So he's going to get sentenced, and people are of course cheering him on, cheering him, to go to jail because they're tired of dealing with him. And it's just, that's news now. Whereas decades ago, it wouldn't have even been a thing to begin with. But somehow this infrastructure exists where these superstars are coming out of nowhere. And that's why I have no problem referring to you as a superstar, because in this field, we're all have this potential to be at the epicenter of this interest for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. You've done an excellent job, I think, curating your show. You're on various networks. You're speaking to lots of engaging individuals. Like I said, your interview skills are exceptional.
I appreciate that.
And when I go through, like I of course subscribe to hundreds of shows. I think I last checked my on one of my apps. I have two podcast apps because the podcatcher can't catch them all.
Yeah.
So I have, and on the one app that I use predominantly, I have 225 subscription feeds.
Wow.
And like,
that's a lot.
I would have to say 80% of them have probably pod faded and they're just taking up space. Mm-hmm. But, I'm still, latched onto them anyways. And of your shows, I do listen to it quite often. It's one of my, it is one of my top queued shows. You talk to a lot of fascinating people. And although, in my personal opinion, I feel like your stuff strays more towards spirit and that venue of paranormal. Yep. Whenever you talk like aliens and stuff like this, I often notice you'll do it on a panel with other people, like such as Brian Bowden, Ron Moorhead, and other people that that I may not be as familiar with, but you bring in experts. I get quote unquote experts, other talking heads that are coming in that may do more rise conversation. And I really commend you for that. Whether you take it on yourself or if you call for backup, either way, I'm going to get a good show out of your feed.
Thank you.
And some of the shows, there are a few that I'll probably, skip. It's like, oh, this doesn't quite tickle my fancy. That's understandable. But the thing is that when I do show up, I'm well fed as far as being informed and entertained.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
With these topics and stuff, like as far as what's coming on, what's over the next horizon right now, there's a lot of talk regarding, and now we're getting to it. Now I can let you speak freely. And don't jump ahead again, because if you do, I've got ready to take you out.
I'll try not to psychically peek at your notes. You're so fun. This is why I enjoyed your show so much. Okay. With the upcoming, there's a lot of upcoming topics that people are very excited about. One of them is disclosure. And I'm sure that there are other upcoming issues. I think around the election, a lot of people, for some reason, got their psychic aliens antennae all stirred up, expecting there to be some sort of Project Blue Beam-esque type of fallout.
in addition to the disclosure. And I'm sure that the other fields probably have some ramped up end of the world, Armageddon, Endgame, what have you. I'm not close enough to that beat to understand. So if there is something out there and you know about it, feel free to bring it up and we'll discuss it. But right now, seems to be front and center is disclosure. What do you know, and what is your opinion on it thus far? And then we'll discuss it.
Well, to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about the disclosure. I'm not really deep into that community, but it does interest me, and I'm trying to do a little bit more digging now. And I really don't know if the governments are trying to distract us from something else, if they're actually gonna give us disclosure that so many people believe is about time that you admit it, or are they going to be telling us 100% truths about it too? Or are they going to keep some aspects back? I mean, I know I saw an interview with Joe Rogan and Donald Trump just before the election, and he was saying that there's files that have been sealed for the longest time on various topics that he plans on opening to read for himself. So I don't know if that was a tactic to get more votes so the people can say, oh, maybe if the president will open up these files, maybe we'll find more disclosure on different topics, not just UFOs, just conspiracy theories as well. So I don't know if that was something that drove people to vote for him, or, I'm up here in Canada, so I can't really speak for the American people, but those are just questions that I have.
Yeah, it seems like the forefront, one of the pinnacles of this disclosure movement, aside from those who claim that they're in the know, like David Wilcock and his peers, is the divisive figure of Lou Elizondo. In my opinion, I've mostly been following threads that have been very dismissive of him, that have been very critical. And I'm very convinced, I've heard a good argument that, he may not be the best source for this, that this is just, in my opinion, a dog and pony show. I mean, he had some sort of behind closed doors thing, and he was showing pictures of a chandelier reflected in a hotel mirror, in a hotel um, window
Room? Oh, okay, yeah.
that was passed off as, ooh, look at this mothership. No, it's a reflection of a chandelier going against the window. This was like stuff that was debunked like decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that we're just seeing more of that a lot of the stuff that he has brought forth is just misconstrued and not quite honest or forthcoming stuff like this. And then there's the discussion behind the discussion where a lot of some people feel that he is bringing a divisiveness where a lot of his audience is this sort of toxic, divisive audience that people want so much to. He's very clearly their guy. Mm-hmm. And they very much want him to be the one to bring the football home, to bring down the touchdown. And if you question that in some sort of way, it's sort of that us versus them. You're either with us or against us. Therefore, we have no means going through intimidation tactics such as doxing people, harassment campaigns, and other such stuff that is very unscrupulous. That, even though so far hasn't been directly connected to him, it's just by way of his fanboy community doing so, and because of that sets up a lot of red flags with me, and I just see a lot of people trying to make sure that they get their picture taken with him, so that way they could get a cut of whatever that it is. I guess they're sort of vying for scraps.
Mm.
That I feel like he's going to get something out of this, and because this song and dance, if you really look at it, has sort of been happening for decades. We see a lot of it on the forefront now because we have the institution or the social media outlet with which to present it as a sort of it's always in the headlines because those are the headlines that we're paying attention to that are curated specifically for us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, this was sort of like to the refuge of talk shows like Jerry Springer and Oprah, early
Mm-hmm.
Oprah and stuff like this. That was where the disclosure conversation was happening, and it's pretty much the same conversation with the same things. And unfortunately, I'm until someone can present a better argument, and an argument that goes beyond nuh-uh and pointing, that's seems to be the means that is prominent now, is to be loud and pointing. When I hear a better argument, I'm just at this point not convinced that disclosure through the means that we're seeing it is going to be authentic. I believe that there are plenty of checks and balances that if aliens have been captured by our government, there are ways to keep it behind closed doors along the lines of, be it through compartmentalization. And if, like, I expect FOIA requests to only go so far, even if you have all the correct terms and all the dots and I's crossed, you can only go so far because everything is kept behind private businesses, and it's no longer in the government's quote unquote hands, so to speak. And because of that, I think that the system is already set up that we can only go so far. And I'm not really throwing my hands up saying giving up. I'm just saying that there might be other avenues that we might have to use, because it's often, there's always a them or they that exists to when we don't have any answers or evidence to blame. Like if you're into Bigfoot or giants or whatever, and any large scale body that is found in relation to any paranormal entities, there's always the Smithsonian comes up and
I
snags
was
it
thinking
away.
that one. Yep.
Always. And the thing is that even though people have been blaming the Smithsonian for decades, they're not. I'm sure that there's some apparatus involved where it is, and it does happen. And if it does happen, it's under the guise of the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian, they're not going to say anything because, they get free press,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the Mandela effect with the what was it, the cornucopia.
Mm-hmm.
They were under no obligation to be honest whether they did or didn't. All the talk about it, got them free press. And in this attention
Definitely. Yeah.
economy, that's good. That's good. And I expect that same apparatus to be used for the Smithsonian as well. And because of that, I don't know. I feel like I've been here before, this disclosure thing, and I'm not excited by it. If anything, it does it sort of, I don't want to say it bores me. It's just I feel like I've already peeked behind the curtain. I've seen what they're hiding, and I just feel like this is just cash grab.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this sort of model implemented, everywhere else as far as social culture war cash grab. We've seen it in the indie comic book scene. There's this comic book called ISOM, and it was promoted as, if you're against woke culture and all this stuff, buy this comic book. And then the comic book sold 3 million, which was astonishing at that time. Yeah. And the creator then came out and said, well, he's like, oh, I never said my stuff was anti-woke. I never said this or that. He backs down on the reason that everyone got excited about it. And then people actually, a year later, opened the comic book and realized it wasn't that quality. It wasn't a quality story.
Mm.
And then people are like, well, we weren't sold a bill of goods. And it's like, well, I already made my money. And, it's just, I see that model implemented everywhere else. It's sort of like Lou Elizondo is sort of selling us his imminent disclosure is the ISOM of ufology that I feel. And I don't, because those who have read the book, I'm not going to read the book myself. I don't care enough to quote unquote win this argument. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that those that have read it said that there's not really anything prominent in it, and that his own experiences are sort of, in some cases laughable, and in some cases copy pasted from other people as well, which is, a possible accusation as well. So I kind of feel like I can see the emperor is wearing no clothes in this instance.
Yep.
And I'm severely disappointed and not really on board with it. I'll always be dismissive of it. And it sucks because some of my favorite people that I've, come up with that have, that they're all on board. And I feel, that it is disingenuous excitement that they're on board just to, again, get crumbs. I don't know. I feel like I've dominated this conversation too much and not given you a chance to speak on it. So if you would please go ahead. I'm sorry to just, there was a lot there.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like smoke screens, or you just throw, like you said, you throw enough crumbs out there for people to want to gobble it up and follow you and believe everything that somebody has to say. And, kind of a little sidestep for me here. It's kind of like whenever I see a video or a photo on social media and someone claims that it's legitimate. Like there was one that somebody showed it was an Egyptian museum, and I can't remember what the actual artifact was. And they said, look, there's one of the Egyptian gods next to it. And I'm looking at it and it's kind of blurred. So I sent it to some friends of mine. I'm like, what do you guys think? Like, I so want to believe that it's legitimate, but I just can't, because it's my personality that I just have to dig further to find out more information instead of just saying, yep, I believe it. And then a friend of mine who's in the film industry, he says, looks like there's a piece of glass there, and what we're seeing might be a deity, Egyptian deity, looks like a reflection. So there could be on the other side of the glass that we're not seeing, a statue of that particular deity. And when you're looking at that particular artifact, it looks like that is next to it. So I thought, I never even thought of a glass reflection, but like I said, he's into the film industry, so he knows about all these little things. So, but I find it fascinating, and I'm so blessed to have great friends in the paranormal community that we can discuss things. And if we don't even agree on things, we actually still have a decent adult conversation, and we're throwing back information of what we think. And it's really nice to be able to not necessarily agree, but we're still friends at the end of the day. It's just brainstorming, trying to figure out, does this look legit to you? And if so, why? Or if not, why? So, and I find that just helps to be able to open your mind to newer things. And I think a lot of things like that, people they shouldn't have blind faith in a lot of things. Like, do your own little research as well.
Yeah. I as you presented, that's sort of like, we want so much for something to be it, and then, under any scrutiny, it might not be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And even
if
with
it is, that's great.
Yeah, even with like the checks and balances that we have, like as far as, making sure that everything, checking for reflections and all this stuff, which, should have been with the advent of technology and stuff like this, and as far as what's prominent and readily available, you'd think we'd be better at that, but it's still, for some reason, reflections, chandeliers are still motherships. And I don't know, it's like, shouldn't we have been over that? But it doesn't seem to be the case. And it sucks that the sort of grade schoolyard magic tricks are still fooling the experts today, or the experts are propagating them in order to fool their audiences. And it's disingenuous, and it's so lowbrow, in my opinion, that this is able to still happen. But with the galvanized fan bases and communities, it's very difficult to, even if you have a crumb of truth, to go against this wave of I don't want to say disinformation, but this wave of I guess deception, outright deception. And it is rather infuriating, and it's
It is.
yeah.
I just want people to be honest. I mean, I keep thinking of the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's just, why do we have to deceive each other? I want people to be honest. And again, whenever I see something like that on social media, I was not there. I was not witness to what they experienced. So maybe they did witness and experience something legit. And I'm just judging from my keyboard,
Yeah, there is out there the whole you weren't there, so X, Y, and Z. But even then, I mean, if it is the deity, whatever it is, then you know, then why isn't it still there? Why aren't more people seeing it? Type of thing. It's where's the follow up then to that?
Yeah.
And that follow up not being there, it's like this sort of, I guess it's sort of repeatability that I guess scientists or skeptics used to look for is, can this be repeated in a controlled environment? And that right there is probably presenting something in the most controlled environment, and it's not, again, repeatable. And I do feel like in some ways our in the efforts of being more open, our standards have been lowered. And I think that's also hurting us in a way. And because it's like there was, the divide was always, skeptics versus believers. And in both instances, they can both be just as bad as the other one claims to be.
Yep.
I mean, we run on the field where like the skeptics are like, I'm going to dismiss everything, and I have a financial incentive to do so because I'm releasing a book about deceiving it or dismissing it. And then the believers are like, no, everything's great and wonderful because I have this incentive where you can talk to me about aliens and stuff for $100 an hour or whatever for a Zoom meeting. Then I'll magically cure your grandma with space stuff, and it becomes like predatory, and it's just a lot to take in, unfortunately.
It is. It's lots of deceit, and that really bothers me. But I am a believer, but I'm also a skeptic, especially when I'm doing investigations. There was one time in particular, we were looking back at our photos, and half the team thought that we caught an apparition, and it just looked like this big mass with no head, and we thought, what is this? And just something nagging at me, wondering, okay, we want so badly to believe, but I just couldn't just sit there. So I did a little bit more digging, looked at the timestamps, trying to figure out what room that we were in, who was in each room. And then I realized that was one of our team members. So the photo looked like somebody without a head, but all it was he had his head down and he had his EMF detector in his hand and he was looking down at it. So the photo that we took didn't look like he had a head. So that was...
Hello, guys. Unfortunately, at this point, I believe a Sasquatch stepped on the Ethernet cable on Katie's end and knocked out the internet for her entire town. However, notes are left in the description on where you can find her. I hope you enjoyed this interview and talking to her and enjoy the time as much as I did. So please tune in to her show and check her out. Thank you for listening.